Okay, folks, and welcome to another exciting episode of Bridging the Gap, the show that helps teenagers and parents ultimately understand each other, hopefully, work better as a family unit together, and ultimately understand what both parties are going through. And we do that through step-by-step guidance, providing our own expertise and our own research as well. And I'm really excited to do this show today for you guys and with you guys. Because Alicia and I, we're going to be talking all about mental health within the workplace. Now, this isn't designed to scare the pants off you, but it is designed to make you aware of what could happen. So this is designed really for teenagers so they understand what their parents are going through, and for parents so they understand what could happen when their teenagers are going on work experience and could happen when their teenagers are leaving for obviously for work after leaving school. But before I get there, I should introduce myself, of course, if you haven't guessed by now, that I'm John Morris, the psychologist in training, among many other things. And let's bring in my co-host today, Alicia Madonna. Alicia, how are you doing today?
Hello, everybody. I'm good. Doing all right. It's been cloudy and rainy over here, so.
It's cloudy today. It was glorious sunshine yesterday, and over the weekend, I had a very, very mild case of like sunburn or whatever, but it just took the energy out of me, as it does, massive headache and things. So I was like, I need to come back in. So it's all good. So what's been happening with you?
No, interviewing for a whole bunch of jobs, trying to just work and do life.
Do all the adult stuff. Yes.
Do all the adult stuff. I'm over it. I just put up a reel on my personal Instagram, and it was like, the question was like, what was one thing that was overrated that everybody like talked up? And it was, this girl was like, adulthood. Overrated.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing. I was talking to someone the other day from Australia, and they were saying, we always want to be somewhere else than where we are right now. So when you're a child, you want to be an adult. When you become an adult, oftentimes you're like, sod this, I want to be a child.
Yeah, exactly. You hit that one wall and you're like, no, I'm good.
Yeah. And sometimes, I mean, it can be really difficult to readjust, and sometimes, especially when you're tired, it's like, okay, I need to take a breath here and come back to it, another day. Yes, I completely understand that.
Yeah, that's hit me a lot in the last couple of years where I'm just like, why did I want to get here so fast?
Yeah, well, that's it. And it's hard as well, because when you leave, oftentimes people may have a plan, but when you leave, and again, like we said before, when you're just thrown out into the world and expected to know what's, happening, as we'll talk about, I'm sure today, it's like, what the heck do I do here? And it is really overwhelming for a lot of folks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then compound on top of it what we're going to be talking about today. Yes. Makes everything all the more better and fun.
Oh yes. So I should say, folks, today this is completely unscripted from my end. Alicia wanted to talk about this today, and I think it's a really awesome topic. So rather than doing the 3 topics that we normally do, we're just going to focus on one, because this is really, it's a big one, lots to unpack. I've got a few notes on the side and just a few facts and figures, but aside from that, yeah. Alicia, it's yours. Away you go.
Awesome. Yeah, I have a couple facts and figures myself. I was looking some stuff up. So just a little background on like why I wanted to talk about this is I recently, as you guys know, have quit my job that I had for 3 years. And a big part of the reason that I quit, I felt like I hit kind of a ceiling there, but I also felt like my mental health was in a seriously desperate state, and I needed to like get out and be away from it. Unfortunately, that was from the top down, and I feel like that is an often occurrence in companies. And what's really sad is the company I worked for was very small, so it wasn't even a large corporation where you don't even know the head guy that's doing whatever it is that they do. I had direct contact with the person that was kind of causing the mental health issues, so it was a little harder. But before we even get into numbers, facts, whatever, I wanted to pose the question to you, John. Have you ever been in a workplace situation where you've made to feel like you're going crazy or like you're being weak? If you have these feelings, if you talk about these feelings, fear of like, losing your job or how your coworkers will think of you, and so on and so on.
Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
I want them both.
You want them both? Okay. The short answer is yes. The long answer, and that obviously it's a really packed question. Yes, I actually had my first. I guess you'd call it like a mental breakdown. I can never call it a nervous breakdown because nerves can't break, but a mental breakdown. I had my first one in my first business when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
I just left school, was not ready, maturity wise, experience wise, and again, was flung out there. Got the job because it was a result of the work experience actually that I'd done, and was expected to know everything that was going on. And they brought me in initially as a marketer. And again, a 17-year-old guy who's just, learning. I didn't learn my real marketing skills until, years later. Yeah, and it all came to a head to, for me, the first time that I'd had it, where I'd gone from marketing, they put me into plumbing, they put me into construction and erection of building sequences and scaffolding and all of which I was not qualified to do. And then basically they were like, okay, we can't figure anything else for you to do. Let's put you on leaflet drops, where basically you would take leaflets and you'd go around houses and post them through letterbox. I was having some health issues at the time, and maybe it was a combination of the medication, maybe it was a combination of the stress. But basically, on one of these walks, came to, and I'm walking into oncoming traffic. My brain was just, I'd literally gone from the pavement or the sidewalk, as you guys would say, into oncoming traffic, and they're beeping the horns at me. And it's like, I can hear it, I can see it, but I'm like, I have no cognitive, stuff is what's going on. But I was calling my mom, so many times a day, just broken because of how they would talk and how they would do things. Now, I wasn't ready for that, in terms of that work environment, and they probably didn't know how to deal with me. On the face of it, it was a construction company, heating, plumbing, electrical stuff, kind of stuff. So it's what we call a typical lads company. There was a lot of swearing, a lot of naked women, posted up on the walls, all stuff that I was very uncomfortable with, because from a spiritual point of view, that just did not align with my spirit. Every second word would be a swear word. So it was just like, okay, this is not what I signed on for. And we'll talk about that. So that really was my first encounter with all of that. And, again, like so many people, got signed off sick, didn't deal with the issue. And then, a couple of weeks later, when I'd gone back, he being the boss actually made me redundant, because you couldn't fire someone for being ill. Over here in the UK, at least, you're protected, but you could make the position redundant. And I more or less said to him in the end, I was like, I'm glad that you made me redundant. It looks better on my records, because I was coming in to hand in my notice. So that was my, and that actually wasn't the worst organization I worked for. I worked for 5. 2 of them were absolute disasters. One of them was fantastic, and 2 were, that was one of them. How about yourself, Alicia?
That's so 17, such a young age to have to deal with that. And so looking back at my kind of history, this last job that I had that one from age 24 to 27. Okay. So mid 20s. I thought I had dealt with enough like bad bosses. But man, put me through the ringer again. My first, so I worked at a paint and sip company, and they're all privately owned franchises, so each owner is different. And the owner that I worked for originally, my first time working as an art instructor, he didn't really understand business. He didn't understand like how to be an employer. He didn't understand the art side of it all. So there was a lot of pressure on us to kind of do not only the art stuff, but management stuff, promotional stuff, cleaning up, inventory, like everything. And then he was also just kind of a I won't say the word, but he just,
dot, dot,
he was
dot,
just,
yes.
yeah, he was just horrible. And
Yeah.
so we ended up leaving. Me and my partner worked there for a very long time, and he actually sued my partner for a breach of contract that he tricked him into signing. So yeah, it was a lot of stuff that happened there. So I thought I went through the ringer with that. Any boss that comes at me, it's going to be a breeze. But this last job that I had, it was an office job. It was a nonprofit. But the executive director came from international business models. So he was functioning on a much different level than what we were.
Yeah.
And he's also, I hate to say this, but like, there is this issue with older men in positions of power in businesses that are stuck in ways of 90s and before that just aren't kosher, and they don't fit with today's social environment and working environment and whatever. And he was definitely one of those people. You know, it was a lot of mind games, a lot of like gaslighting, making you think it was okay, but then coming down on you later. Literally just sitting there constantly worried when he was going to come in a mood, not sure if your work was good or bad or how you were going to be treated because of it. So that was a doozy of a job. So that's why I just feel like it is so important to talk about it and be aware of it, because going through that experience, this last one really made me realize that, you know, this is a common occurrence in the workplace. This is not an isolated, at first I thought it was an isolated situation that I just kept getting thrown into, but it is a very widespread issue across the world. And I don't know how you look at it, but as a historian, at least here in the US, you know, when you look at our history, after World War I, we hit Great Depression, everything was just, there wasn't any work. And so then as people started getting more jobs, as things kind of went on the uphill swing, this mentality was work, hustle, make your money, so that you can go home and take care of your family. I feel like we've succeeded at that. It was good. We needed to go through it. And now we need to shift again. And we haven't shifted. I feel like that mindset, that business model is still in place from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And you were still using it. And it's now causing, and I'm sure it was causing mental illness problems then. I mean, on top of a plethora of other issues. But now there's a lot of different social, economic issues that people deal with. To compound that with a workplace environment is just like the last thing that anybody needs.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's how I look at it when it comes to like a business model and history and how we've progressed. But I do think that the pandemic in some ways has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise. It's been a little bit of a kick in the butt to a lot of companies to realize, hey, one, we can have some of our people can work remote, and that's okay. A lot of companies are like, no, you need to be in the office here where I can yell at you every day. You know what I mean? And now we're realizing that people can do their work from home. They can be in the comfort of their own home. Honestly, having your animal around can be a huge stress reliever in the middle of a hectic work day. And then there's a lot of other business changes that are happening, but I just want to get your ideas on all of this before I dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a lot of things, and so many things that come to my mind. The word that you used was hustle, which was a word that they used again, like you say, from the Great Depression, the 40s, 50s upwards. I think a lot of the time people forget that for every sale that we have, for every business transaction that we will ever do, there is a person on the other end of it. And, when you start treating people like a commodity, all you're ever going to be is a hustler, which is why you see so many of these flash in the pan businesses. It's part of the reason that we've been around for 20 years, because right from day one, I remembered, whether I was teaching art class or youth groups or doing custom work for people or coaching or whatever it might be, or even for my book, every single person I knew, usually personally, or through social media. So that's the first thing. I think, a lot of these bigger companies have gotten away from, the art of selling. And by that, I mean the art of providing a service for someone else and actually caring about your customer. The amount of times that I know you and I, we talked about this in the early days, that, the amount of times that you spend on the phone to these big companies, if the gas companies or energy companies or whatever it might be, trying to get them to do what you need them to do, and they just muck you about, and it's an hour or two out of your time. So that's the first thing, is companies need to go back to, actually really caring about the customer. The second thing is, I think it's important for us to know a couple of things. The first thing is mental health right now is the biggest number one illness within the workplace, full stop, all over the world. Originally, these facts came from Canada. Doing a little bit more research, it's all over the world. And there's a number of issues with that, which we'll talk about later on. But, I think as well, people need to be aware of why they actually go to work. So, Alicia, why do you go to work?
Well, that is a two-sided question or answer. I mean, one is to make a living, just straight up make money, just so that I can live and survive, pay my bills, and be here, and actually maybe do some things that I like on the side.
It's always good.
The other reason, which is hopefully the reason most people are able to go to work, is because you enjoy it, because you love the work, because you want to go do it. Yeah. But I know that that is not the case for a lot of people. Yeah. And even if it is the case, which for me this was what was hardest about my past job, is I loved the work. I loved the work. I loved who I worked with. I just didn't like my boss. Yeah. And unfortunately, that was a large component of my job. So hopefully if you love it.
See, well, and the thing is, I mean, it's good that you're able to say that you love it. I can honestly say I spent a large majority of my working life before I went as a solo entrepreneur, really not liking it and having some severe health issues as a result. And we're talking like BPD, borderline personality disorder, as a result of post-traumatic stress disorder that was caused from anxiety and it not being dealt with properly. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, later. But the reason I asked you, Alicia, about that is because it's the most common answer that whenever I talk to people about this, it's the most common answer that I get back is, well, duh, I go to make a living. It's like, okay, the real thing is you actually go there to make your boss a living. And as a result, it filters down. It's the thing that people always forget is you're actually there.
So true.
Yeah, you are there to make your boss a millionaire, so as you may be, or a billionaire, so as you may be a millionaire. Okay. Now, and I'm going to put up a picture of this. Obviously, taking it off the wall right now would be, immensely inconvenient. But I've got a giant old clock on my wall, and I love it. I love history as well. My room, the studio is filled with old paintings from history and heroes from the past. This clock I specifically bought because it has all the old cogs, it has all the old mechanisms, it's a lot of things in there. Now you may be saying, John, why on earth do you bring this up if you just, completely lost your train of thought? No. Each person that goes to work for an organization, whether it's a big organization, small organization, whether it's health, whether it's fitness, whether it be computers, whatever it is a cog or a spring within the mechanism to make the overall thing work. If I take, certain parts of the clock out, it's not going to work properly, okay? So you need to understand that you are a cog in the mechanism of the business to make it work properly. Now, at no point, since I've had this clock, I've had it now for 5 or 6 years, at no point has that clock ever, the second hand, for example, or the hour hand has never shouted and bawled at the at the second hand or at the cogs that make it work. It's not saying make it work, make it faster, 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 come on. It does its job. It's never verbally abused or physically abused anything, both of which I have seen in various positions of business and things. And this is something that's always really interesting. At no point should anybody ever be verbally abused in their business, be verbally abused in their job, be physically abused in our job. We have the second company that I worked for that was a disaster. We had a boss, if he wanted to fire you and he knew that you were maybe a little bit smarter than you, he would physically challenge you. He'd shove you from behind. You would turn around and square up to him. And I saw this happen on 3 occasions. And you would turn up and square up to him and he would fire you on the spot for unprofessional conduct. Now, amazingly, nobody ever took him to a tribunal. However, that organization is now defunct. It is gone. And I have to say, I learned a lot of my lessons from business on how not to do it from watching them.
Sometimes an equally important thing to go through.
Well, that's it. And, but to, go into a business environment, you're there to do a specific job. You're not there to be verbally abused. You're not there to be attacked. And, I mean, heck, in the ancient societies, they would have said, oh, wow, mental health issues are the biggest issues that surround our business right now. There's something wrong with it. And there's something wrong with society. Instead, now you've got people that turn around and say, oh, this is perfectly normal. Here's some pills, here's a sick note, away you go. And there are 3 areas that people need to be aware of. And I'll just quickly unpack these. Oh, by the way, did you know, this is on record actually, that you can actually be diagnosed now and given a sick note within 18 seconds. The doctor won't even say to you, what's the matter, what's going on. As soon as you walk in there and say, I'm really struggling with my work, he's already filling out on his pad, gives you your sick note, hand this in, 18 seconds, gone.
Wow.
And what the heck does that do? Because all you do then, I've been on sick leave before. Your first week, you think, oh, great, this is wonderful. I'm on holiday here. Your second week, then you're spending worrying about going back to work, which tells me that the issue hasn't been sorted. But the root cause is threefold. It's you, it's your boss or your colleagues, or it's your environment. And that has to be dealt with. But yeah, anyway, that's enough for me to unpack just now. How about you?
Well, I think it's insane that you have been in a situation where there was a physical abuse happening, because obviously that is a more black and white issue. I feel like verbal abuse is so much more insidious because it is tricky and it's finicky and it's hard to kind of prove. It's how each party kind of views the situation, where there was a lot of times where verbal abuse was common, if not at me, at my direct supervisor in my office, at my colleague literally outside my door, where volumes got loud. Things were said that was like, what? And it was hard because how do you really prove that, that was harmful? That was just to the one person, it's normal, it's fine. I'm just saying what, I need to say to get, as a boss, to get you to do your work. But from the other side, you're viewing it as like, I can't even contemplate doing my work now. That I'm so caught up on what you are mad about and how I can defend myself. And that is so hard. So just a little bit more background on my situation is, obviously as a nonprofit, you have a board of directors that is the boss collectively of the executive director. Unfortunately, the board is basically just like written off everybody. When I left, I wrote a very long email to the president, and I was basically brushed off. Like, we're doing, verbatim, his words were, we're doing what we think is best. We can only hope for better in the future. And I was just like, I respectfully disagree. You are not doing what is best. There is serious mental health issues going on in this office. And that is the stigma and the issue happening everywhere. Nobody wants to deal with it because dealing with it is so much harder than not dealing with it. But I think across the country, across the world, we are going to hit a point eventually where it implodes, where we hit a point where employees are going to be like, screw this, I don't have to deal with it, I'm going to go and figure something else out. And I actually think that the pandemic has made a lot of people realize that there's a lot of other ways to make money that isn't an office job. And so now they're leaving. And actually the organization I left, I was the first, and then 2 other people followed right after me. So you're now starting to see this domino effect, and good organizations are going to lose their employees. They're going to lose their drive, their stamina, their setting, or their image in the community. And it's just going to be a downhill slope. So, and a lot of times I feel like higher ups or whoever, they just kind of slap a band-aid on things. They say, okay, go to training. Okay, I'll do the little course and then I'll just go right back to normal. That's pretty much how it always goes. And I don't really know what the solution is. I don't know, maybe you have an idea of what the solution is, but I'm still like in the middle of this craziness that I can't even see a solution, because every solution that I thought would be good has just been kind of like turned its nose up at. So your thoughts?
So I have many thoughts.
Love it.
You know, one of my thoughts is the boss or the person running it. And again, I've worked for large and small organizations. So the boss, the head person, head honcho, CEO, whoever, is usually very good at sales, is usually very good at creating a product, and they can do their job. However, they may suck at marketing or knowing how to manage other people. Because what tends to happen is they're very bullheaded. They're very set in their ways for sure. There was a word that I was going to use. They're very, it's just ruthless. And that's how they've got to where they are. Now, again, like we said before, when I started managing people years ago, I was dreadful at it because I didn't know at that point. You know, I had people coming into my organization and saying to them, I want to do this, this, and this, and I want you to do this, this, and this, and being able to then, you know, expect people to know exactly what I was talking about. It's the equivalent of asking you to come into our car park and into our driveway and build, you know, a 7-foot wall. And then when you've done that 7-foot wall, I want you to move it 50 feet to the other side of the car park. And then when you've done that, I want you to take it down again, and I want you to move it 100 feet to the side of the car park. And then originally I want you to, it's essentially what has been classed as, it's not only mental abuse, but it also can lead people to literally insanity. That's what it is. And that's what's expected a lot of the time. So, you know, and I'm, you know, part of our business structure and our business plan is to work with organizations, because I would love to do this, is to work with organizations where, you know, there is a lot of mental health issues going on here, and to be able to say, okay, right, where is this? Which department is it coming from, first and foremost? And if it's a small area, okay, let's see how you're managing people. And I'll give you a prime example. The company I worked for, it was, and you would have people shouting and bawling in the office. You would have them shouting and bawling in your face at you. And I would tell people, it's like, look, if you're going to have a go at me, have a go at me at the end of the day. Don't do it at 9 o'clock in the morning, because I'm in sales, okay? And I'm going to be talking to a lot of people throughout the day. But plus, if you notice when people are reprimanded first thing in the morning, how they, especially if they're in sales, but how their productivity just plummets. And this is all because people in the top usually, or, you know, HR or whatever it is, they do not know how to manage people. So if you there's a great book that came out, I believe in the 80s or 90s, called The 1 Minute Sales Manager. It talks about the 1 minute appraisal, basically. And the way that it works is like this, and this is exactly what I do. You've got 30 seconds where you talk about the issue. For example, if someone's done something wrong, they were late and they're repeatedly late. Okay, so you're repeatedly late, you're not on time, we need you to be on time, and you do that for 30 seconds. They ultimately need to know how you're feeling and why this is an issue. You don't need to shout and bawl at them. You don't need to act like an a-hole, basically. And then the next 30 seconds is building them back up. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I love what you're doing when you're here. We just need to make sure you're here on time because there's so much work that's coming in right now, and we want you to be part of this. That's going to leave the person feeling absolutely elated and being aware of, okay, I need to be here on time because they actually value me and, they need me to do the job. Whereas if you're a 17-year-old guy, in my case, and you're constantly being told that you are a ... nightmare and that you're no good, and then you're this and you're that, eventually you start to believe it. I would get told off, by different bosses for exactly following what they told me to do. And I would say to them, I was like, look, I did exactly what you told me to do. And said, well, why didn't you use your initiative? And I was like, because I used my initiative before in the last season, and you had issues with it and you complained about it. So, I'm doing exactly what you tell me to do. And that way, if there's an issue with it, it's on you, not on me. I don't think anybody that's going into work should ever, and again, I've had this in business. I had it in church. The church that I worked for, the last position before I went self-employed, was, I didn't deal with the issues well enough because I didn't know how to deal with them. Still very young. I was, my mid-20s and whatnot when I was a youth worker, but I was bullied from subconsciously, I think from day one, but I only started noticing it in year 3, and I didn't leave until year 6. And by the end of it, I was, like I say, PTSD, BPD, all things that I've overcome now, which is fantastic. And I teach other people how to do it. But, when you've got a boss that's basically getting you to think that you aren't good, you've got a youth group of 40 and 50. It's the largest youth group in the county. And, you're being told, well, you're no good, you're not this, you're not that. And, you're saying this. Well, naturally, people are going to start lashing out, But I agree with you now. More and more people are finding, work on Amazon. There are actually jobs there now that people can do that are specifically designed to be remote access. Because, it might cost the company less. In terms of an overall salary, but it'll cost you less in terms of time and travel. So I that's, I know that was probably a lot to unpack, but, to kind of surmise before we move on, just as we're all on the same page, the boss needs to be, he needs to have essentially similar to what we do, where we walk you through step by step what's going on. And I would say every meeting that I would do with one of their colleagues or one of their employers or employees, I would say, right, I want you in on this meeting because I want you to know exactly what your staff is saying about you and exactly what they feel about you, because you need to, or whoever, HR department or whoever's the management, they need to know, what they're doing. What they're doing essentially wrong that needs to be corrected. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, I think, like you say, there is that stigma even today. I'm talking 20 years ago when I was going through this. But there is that stigma even today that if you start talking about mental health within the workplace, it's like, oh my goodness, is it going to cost you your job? Is it going to cost you this? Is it going to cost you that? And, that's what we're starting to put out there now more, is that safe place in that organization where we're able to help people with mental health issues, deal with strategies. And if we get enough reports that are through about the same person, then we can go to the higher ups and say, look, if you want your organization to continue, this is the area that you need to focus on. And it's as simple as that. Bless you.
Thank you. I find it crazy that it takes so many complaints or so many filings of certain things for things to actually happen. Like that was the case for me at my past job, where we were just sending in complaint and file after file and nothing still happened.
But what that says to me is then that the higher ups and the management don't value their staff. And it also says that literally they're just like, they're just complaining, it's fine, let him get on with it. And then that's probably the company within the next 5 years that will go out of business.
I have, it's really, really sad because I really love the organization and I feel like it's very important for the
Mhm.
community. But yes, I feel like it is on that downward
Yeah.
swing. The problem that I saw a lot, and I want to see if what you think of this and if you've seen this. Um, a lot of times when the complaints were put in and the board was finally like, okay, we have to do something or else legally we could be, in trouble.
Mhm.
They would get training for the entire office. And it's like, okay, that's great in a normal situation because I feel like everyone should have certain training, whether that be sexual harassment, proper workplace, whatever, sensitivity. But it literally made the situation kind of, at least how they handled it, it made the situation kind of like null and void because they basically clumped the problem in with everybody who has the problem and now everybody's getting the same training, so the person who had the problem doesn't recognize that this is a him problem, this is
Yeah.
to him an organization thing, so then that continues the behavior. And yeah, I just find it crazy that why wouldn't we like just pinpoint the one person that is the problem and say you need to go do this training. I mean, it kind of is a punishment in a lot of ways. And but that's something that as a boss, as an employer, you need to be responsible for. And it was baffling to me that that was how it was approached, that because we complained, then we were getting basically punished to go through this process with, which granted, again, probably a good process to go through anyways, but just the situation around it was very crappy. The fact that,
Yeah. Interesting. Um,
yeah.
I mean, there's a number of thoughts that I have there. I mean, specifically for the old, I'm going to call them the old timers, folks that have been in that situation for a long time. And again, if you get a good person there, you can learn a lot of wisdom from there. I was very blessed in two organizations, thankfully, to have that. And one of them was manual labor, which you'd never think of all things.
Right.
But one of the things that's becoming very much apparent, similar to when we talked last week about the LGBT shows and the other stuff, is, there was a mindset that was in the past and how they ran business, and that was okay for that time period. But things aren't okay to do that now. Like you said, sexual harassment, the way that, someone would make a comment in the past and it was just kind of, thrown away. Now, obviously, people are sick and tired of it and they're speaking out against it. I think often these training programs are given so as the person doesn't feel singled out. But
Yes.
I mean, there's so many issues with that because, like you said, it doesn't solve the issue. Neither, in my opinion, does getting the two parties in one room because it's the boss and it's you. If you're willing to risk your job, then fine. Stand up and and do that. But and again, people can say, oh, but we've got a mediator. Well, it's going to be uncomfortable then from that point to the day that you leave, which is what happened with me. It's, I suppose when you mention the training, it's the kind of training that's there as well. I mean,
Yeah.
again, if it's not going to do anything, and I don't get this, I mean, and this, yeah, I'm flitting around in my own thoughts here because organizations and the higher ups tend to think, oh, we'll just get any training and it'll all be good. We'll put it on a DVD and we'll sit and watch it together. And it's like, you need somebody, again, similar to what we do, which is basically to look at what you're doing and say, here is the issue. You don't need training for everybody else. You're the issue. You're the one that needs training, like you said. So when you're doing a sexual harassment thing, well, how the heck does that solve a sexual harassment issue? It doesn't. It just basically says, look, if you're doing this, stop doing it. And you're like, you're right. Okay. Do you really think that people are going to take that on board? Because oftentimes, like you say, they go for the training. It's a lovely day out. They have some nice sandwiches, a nice talk, and then they go back to their exact normal ways.
Give them like a week of being really good and then
Yeah.
right back.
That's it. As a boss, as an employer, I'm responsible as well for my own training, which goes back to what I said right at the beginning, that, you know, the majority of bosses, they get an idea in their head. It might be, I'm going to start an art company. I'm using that obviously because that's one of 4 of my businesses. I'm going to start an art company and it's going to provide paintings of pets. Right. I want someone in marketing. I want someone to do the website. I want someone to do sales, blah, 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 whatever. But at no point does it seem to be that, certainly not when I was working there. I don't know about now. But when I was working, I couldn't tell you that our boss was doing self-improvement or actually studying more on how to make his business better. That's why he's out of business now. But it also gives a clear indication of their headspace and where they're at. If they just think, oh, we'll just throw a bit of training at it. That's what they're after. And it's like, no, you're missing the point here. The issue is that, the person that's in HR or person running this, person leading it, needs some, maybe needs some training in how to deal with people as opposed to, whatever the course might be. And I don't think that is often addressed enough. And that's where I think organizations like us, again, another 2 or 3 years, I think this is going to be a humongous thing. And I'm excited about it for not just myself, but for all the people that's going to work with us, that are going to be working with these companies that are saying, okay, Bank of Scotland, Nationwide, NatWest, Bank of America, and, bring them on. Why are so many of your staff going off on sick? And the common answer is, oh, that's just the way they are. They don't want to work. There must be something in the water. And it's like, give me a week to kind of explore your methods and your practices. Let's see how this is done. Again, an organization that I worked for, it isn't surprising when you've got someone shouting and bawling in your face. It's no surprise as to why someone would go off sick or burst into tears or, not show up for work and take you for a ride. It's not surprising at all. And that is not a good dynamic to have. And if you are, you shouldn't be in business, in my opinion.
I agree. I definitely feel like the lack of ability to manage people is the problem. Because you're right. The boss is there usually because he's good at sales, they're cutthroat, they're ruthless. And that is exactly who that person was. But
the boss's job is also to look after his staff.
Yes.
It's that simple.
That I think is the most overlooked part of a boss's job, is that they're there to make sure that their employees are okay. Hold on. It's the National Association of Mental Illness. And so I looked up a couple statistics. And it said, I think this is from recently. Let me just double check because I want to make sure.
But just when you're looking at that, Alicia, I mean, how many times, in a month or, usually at least once a week, I'll message you because I know we're doing this show. I know what you're going through. And it'll probably be something along the lines of, are you doing okay? And I do the same with 3 or 4 others because... That would
be... So if my boss ever came up to me and asked me, are you okay? How are you doing? I'd probably fall out of my chair because I'd be like, well, since you asked, but then again, it's...
Go on. I was just going to say that the problem with it is because there's such distrust there, they have to do it from day one. And because there's such distrust there, you're like, yeah, I'm doing fine. Why?
Yes. I was just going to say that. It's like, yeah, it's great if you ask, but like most people would be like,
what's he after? Yeah,
like, what's the trick here? What's the angle? What's the play? So it's like, it's fostering that. It's not just asking once, it's asking multiple times, being like, hey, I understand if this is happening, just kind of making them feel like they can talk about it. And actually, one of the quotes that I pulled from was that the stigma of mental health keeps employees silent. And that is the biggest issue. It's that fear of losing your job, fear of losing respect of your employees, fear of not getting a job in the future, because if your current boss thinks you have a mental illness, then they might relay that and so on and so on. But the 2 statistics that I thought were insane are these. One, roughly 85% of employees have mental health conditions that are undiagnosed or untreated.
Yeah.
85%.
Yeah.
And I think that's also very telling that across the board, not just workplace mental health, is something that we do not talk and discuss about nearly enough. We don't. I'm glad there's more resources out there now for like help and counseling. I think just because of how I search things on my social media, a lot of sponsored ads come up for like teletherapists where you can pay a very small fee and you have somebody literally on your phone whenever you need them. I'm loving that is becoming more normalized, because I think everybody, no matter how well situated you are, everybody can benefit from some type of counseling or therapy. So the fact that there's 85% doesn't surprise me, but also is shocking.
Don't you feel that it's really sad that that actually has to be a thing? It's not dealing with the issue, you know, of your boss. It's basically just saying, okay, we're going to provide you with strategies so you're able to do your job. So you may get shouted and bawled at in the face, but we're going to provide you strategies on how to deal with this. And
now, go on.
I was just going to say, you know, it's something I want to unpack that was, it was just, again, a thought that was there. When you said, you know, 85%, again, that doesn't surprise me. I'm surprised it's not actually higher. But what's really interesting is, as a psychologist, which I love, is how all of these things, all of the abuse, all of the verbal stuff, it actually changes the shape of your brain. Our brains change as a result of severe stress, severe anxiety, severe depression. And, you know, severe trauma. And like we said, and we've said numerous times, when you have that mental breakdown, you're mentally shutting down and you can't function, it's because your brain can't take anymore. And it's basically closing down to protect the body. That's the brain's design, is to protect the body. You know, now just a few statistics here, we are expected to work, well, I'm not, because I've jumped out of that rat race, but most people are expected to work most evenings, most weekends. You know, statistics show that people are actually checking their work email when they're in the bath, when they're on the toilet, when they're having breakfast, before they've said hello to their families.
Yep.
In Denmark now, I believe they only work an average of about 20-25 hours a week. I may be wrong about that, but it's a really small fraction. Whereas in the UK and the United States, it's 40, 50, 60 hours. And just before Alicia jumps up, she's dying for a comment here. I've actually found personally, since I switched and I do less work now, and I do 20 hours a week, focused direct sales, where I just sit and talk to people and I say, right, rather than me trying to sell a painting, rather than me trying to sell, you know, an anxiety product, I'm like, how can what I do provide service for you? So for example, Alicia's having a major meltdown. I've got a course on that. It's on special offer. You know, people see that, because then I start to become, and our organization starts to become, the people who have an answer to the problem. And that makes a big difference. But I find when I only do it for 20 hours a week, I mean, it's 5 hours, you know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's not a massive amount of time, but it's enough time for me to be able to close more sales, because I figured out how to really remember that the person is a customer, and the customer is actually a person. Those two go hand in hand. And asking myself the question, what can I do now that can help somebody else and provide service for them? Sorry, Alicia, go for it.
No, you're fine. So you talked about like average work hours. And so I did look it up because I was curious. Denmark, I wouldn't be surprised, because I've heard a lot of things about their education system and their work system. So I'm not surprised in that. I didn't find anything, but I
think it's about 20 to 25 hours. They turn up at like, I think it's like 10:30 or whatever it is, and they actually finish at like 2 or 3 o'clock.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, but they've got it fixed.
Yeah, so I looked it up. So the U.S. average work week is 38.6 hours.
Okay.
The UK average work week is 36.6 hours. The lowest I found, which it's funny that I didn't find Denmark, but the Netherlands is an average of 29 hours a week. Now, what's crazy is that the UK and the US are not nearly close to the countries that have the longest average work week. So what I found was Colombia and Turkey, they have an average of 48-hour work weeks. And that is absolutely mind blowing. Something that I've heard whispers about, coming from Canada, and it started a little bit in Europe, is a 4-day work week.
Yes.
And I know that Spain is currently in a trial period of trying to get that in place. And I could not be a bigger advocate for that. There's a lot of studies that are saying that, basically exactly what you said, that the less stress and the less time you're spent at work, the more productive you're going to be at work.
But here's the thing, that the results as well are also more productive and more amazing, that people close more and more sales when they, like, again, I found this, people close more sales when they're doing it for 5 hours a day as opposed to 8 or 9 hours a day. And people are more productive and get more done in that 20-hour work week than they do, when we weren't designed to be working all the time. It goes back to the Victorian age and the age of the Pharaoh, where you would be worked to death.
Yep, exactly. And I think that is starting to show, and kind of like how I mentioned at the top, this is it's borderline archaic business model now. I mean, it's only been maybe 100 years, but still 100 years in our timeline is a lot of stuff happening. 100 years in the past might have been a blip, but now with the advances in technology, advances in social and cultural situations, we are extremely behind on our business model. And it's now, all of these issues are now starting to come to the surface. The last statistic that I had is that employers can lose upwards of $100 billion and 217 million lost workdays a year contributed solely to mental health issues.
So that's what I was going to say to you, because when you said earlier on that, some of the lines of it was easier to just put them off on the sick than it is to actually deal with these issues. And again, that's a common thing. That's why I want to circle back around to it, because that's a common thing. Oh, we'll just send them off on the sick. It's fine. But the majority of organizations, certainly here in the UK, still pay you while you're off on sick. Now, I know the United States is a little bit different, and it varies obviously from state to state, but here you could take, it's 3 weeks with full pay, sometimes even 3 months. And then after that, you've got to get a doctor's note to say whether you're ready to come back to work. I've known people, actually personally, teachers that took 6 months to a year off full pay because they were not fit, literally were not fit to go back to work in that situation. And the issue with that, obviously, is, you're putting them in there with children, you're putting them in there as a place of influence, and then you're expecting them to do the job, as opposed to saying, right, what are the issues here? What's going on? What's this really about? So like you said, it actually costs globally probably hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, pounds, and yen every single year, because we're not dealing with the root cause, which is the work environment, which is the boss. And it could be the person. Hey, the person may be crap at what they do. Their competency level may be not that. They may be, as I was, not emotionally mature enough to do that job in that environment. And that's fine. But hey, at least let's, one of the things that we're trying to put together, again, as a practice for going forward, is if someone's doing an intern program with us or working with us, we had it when we were running the art business. So-and-so wasn't particularly good. Okay, right. Can I train them up first and foremost? And if I can't, and they're just not, adaptive to that, then I'll say, okay, right, let's help them help themselves and get somewhere else. So as they, again, at least know, we're standing by our own codes and practices, as opposed to, oh, well, you can't do this, get out, you're fired, like I said,
that's not going to do anybody any good.
No. Well, at the end of the day, I mean, it doesn't make you look good. If someone's left us and, they leave on one of two reasons, they can say, well, I was released, but at least John and the organization helped me, to find another job the best they could. I just wasn't, ready for it. Or you can do the opposite. We can say, you were fired and he treated me like rubbish. I never want to speak about him. And all I'm ever going to do is speak rubbish about him. And that's obviously what people do with organizations, around the world now. And that's the reality. So, it's all about how we as employers look after the people we're working with, not just our clients, but our staff as well. If we want the best, then we should be providing the best as well. Our job, our cogs in the machine essentially are like clones of ourselves. You know, we can market, we can sell, we can do podcasts, we can do this, this, and this, but we haven't got the time to do everything. So you need people there, you know, to do the websites and to do all that other stuff. And you need to treat them well, because otherwise, why are they going to do the best for you?
Yeah. That's an amazing way of putting it. Because I feel like, a lot of times bosses look at their employees as lesser than, and
you know what that is,
shows.
Alicia? Just while we're on that thought, the reason that they look at them as lesser is because there's still this age-old mentality that says, I pay your wages, you are my property. And it doesn't matter if you get there at 7:30 in the morning and you're not meant to start till 9, but if you leave, you know, at 3 or 4 o'clock, again, the crying blue murder. So that's that mentality.
Which is funny, because really, and I think you mentioned this before, is that the employees are the ones creating the salary for the employer. So it's crazy
absolutely
for them to look at you like, I'm paying you.
Yeah.
Which is, especially so coming from my situation in a nonprofit, which is even crazier, because the workers are the ones that create the revenue for not only the executive director, but for everybody else. Like the department I worked in was development. So we literally got sponsorship, grants, funding, money for the entire organization. So then to be told that, you know, you're only got a job because of this person, it's kind of like, well, is that true? Is that really true?
The interesting thing, sorry, I was just gonna say, the interesting thing as well is oftentimes employers are looking from the wrong end. So they're only focused on what we don't have, what they don't like, all of that stuff, and that's the only time you'll ever hear from them. Whereas, you know, again, you know, the amount of times that, again, as soon as we finish a show, we'll be like, yeah, that was great, that was really good, because I want you to go into the day feeling amazing, you know. And I do the same with everybody else that I work with. But that's my own personal thing. I've learned this, and that's why it's important for bosses and employees to really learn how to manage people, how to look after people, how to care about them, because otherwise you're going to be like, well, I don't want to work with that moron again.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, and honestly, now that I left this job, it's a great position, but like, I don't want to like suggest anybody for the job, because I don't want them to have to go through the same things that I went through. So it makes it really hard. I think the one last thing that I have for all of this is, and I don't know how it is in the UK, but health insurance here is messy. It is not good. I currently don't have any insurance right now because I don't have a full-time job, which is okay, knock on wood, for the moment. But one thing that I find in relation to this whole conversation is that a lot of insurances here do not cover, or don't cover well, any kind of mental health counseling therapy. So that now, not only are you leaving your workers with this serious mental issue, but you're not providing them with like in-company resources to deal with it, and you're not providing them with any way to get it outside of the company. Like, I know for me personally, I've seen therapists like handfuls of time, but never consistently, because I can't afford it, because I can't afford the $100+ every visit. And my insurance doesn't cover that kind of stuff, which to me is just a huge blaring sign of how messed up we look at the workplace and how we don't value mental health.
It's interesting for sure. You know, and there's a number of, you know, a number of different, obviously, you know, avenues. I think one of the biggest fears that companies have, you know, in terms of mental health programs is, again, like we said before, the stigma that's there. And again, it's the whole thing of it's understanding what mental health is. You know, and that's the important thing. Mental health doesn't mean your squash is messed up, that you're losing your mind or anything like that. It means that you're under a severe amount of, you know, pressure from home, from this, from that, from the other. And then when your work environment maybe isn't set up the best way that it could be, and it's, hey, let's face it, it's difficult, for bosses and employers and HR and, managers and whatever, to actually set it up where it's working perfectly all the time. We don't have that. We're
Yeah.
working towards that. We partially don't have that because we're working with 5 different organizations that we've created. So there's always something and some moving part that's going on. That's, but I think when it comes down to it, you can have all those moving parts going on if you've got a team of people that are actually nice and respectful and responsible and responsive and actually care genuinely about each other's needs. And I know some bosses would say, look, they're not there to be all pally-pally, they're there to do a job. I would then argue if your work environment is not that pally-pally environment to a degree at least, then your productivity isn't going to be that good. Your job isn't going to be that good. One of the notes that I made there, in fact, 2 of the notes, there is the concern that people would abuse it. Why would someone want to go to a mental health clinic if they did not need to? I mean,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
because again, like you said, the stigma that's there. But for me, organizations should provide it in some form or another. And it may be that they provide you to go to 3 counseling sessions or coaching sessions or whatever it might be. If it's, if the issue is related to the workplace, if it's, for example, my child keeps me up all night, then they might be saying, but again,
Yeah.
if they care, and if you're bringing in a lot of money to that organization, then I'm going to say, as a coach, I'd be saying, okay, what can I do to help? Because again, I want you to perform and produce the best results you can. And if you're not doing that and I can do something about it, then it's my job and responsibility to do that. And it's obviously a much bigger, thing than just that, but that's how I look at it personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel like as long as you're trying and you're making the effort, I feel you're on the right path. It's when you don't even put the effort in.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, nothing's ever going to be perfect. No business is ever going to be perfect because everybody has different views on what perfect is. But as long as you are communicating, working towards it, and really trying, I feel like as an organization, you're doing what you can for your employees. I feel like I was going to say something else, but I forgot.
I just feel a lot of the times that the biggest issues come from management and from the higher ups because they're bringing their own garbage to work and they're putting it on everybody else. And again, it's like everything else. Happiness filters down from the top. When you've a happy boss, it filters down, everybody's happy. When you've got a boss that's angry and frustrated, it filters down, everybody's angry and frustrated. Again, the organization reflects the owner, the leader. It's the same as the church. The church will always reflect the minister and the people you've got in leadership. And when you start to process things that way and you're able to say, okay, that makes a lot of sense, having more accountability of one's own self, whether you're the employee or the employer, is a massive thing. But a lot of people just don't want to either be told that, hey, you are the issue for whatever. And again, I think it's the stigma.
Which is crazy to me that that's an issue because that's the mentality they have in business.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did that go?
Yeah.
Why is that not applicable here?
Well, I have an open door policy where, well, it depends who it is, but, if Katie, my wife, for example, or you or Laurie, were doing something, I expect brutal honesty because I may be doing something and responding in a way that I'm not aware that I'm responding in, and other people may see it. Now, if it's sometimes, a person's just at you because it makes them feel better, then you're like, right, okay, kind of thing. But when it's actually, you're dealing with these things, and if you look, why does it have to be that you get upset and frustrated because somebody doesn't like something that you do? And that to me then shows how insecure the people in management really are. And I think that's where it needs to begin, is with self-development and emotional intelligence on themselves rather than, I mean, heck, I feel we're so far on because we're doing this and we're talking about this compared to a lot of organizations, because I looked at how they operate and how they work and the stress levels that they're causing their staff. And I'm like, I ain't going to be like that. When people work me, I want them to know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah. My only hope in all of this is that, there is this new wave, there is this new
Yeah,
mindset. Younger generations are starting to filter
definitely.
up. And the hope is that eventually, if there are the old timers that are still up there, hopefully they can be humble enough to adjust and change. But the hope is that eventually they will filter out, we will filter in, and workplaces hopefully should get better. But you know, this could be an entirely different topic. But you are kind of a product of your
Yeah,
environment and
definitely.
your social situation. So there could be a chance that our generation, actually, I know there are people of our generations that are going to be just like
Hmm.
these old timers that are there. So I just think as long as we can start making it normal, start talking about it more, really making it an upfront issue, hopefully as we go on, it'll become at least mitigated.
Definitely. And the whole thing is just I suppose to wrap up for me, people are a product of their environment and situations and things. We only know what we know. And the interesting thing is if you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to change. If you always think, oh, well, I just have to be that way because my dad was, as opposed to, wait a second, I actually can choose how I, behave, and life doesn't just happen to me, it happens as a result of how I respond. Then, but again, I think it goes back to training for the people at the top. And I think, that's where it needs to filter down. It has to start at the top. They've got to be, the ones that are responsible. They're running the organization and they
Mhm.
need to take care of people. They're the father figure essentially in
Yeah.
the organization, and it has to
Yeah.
filter down through there. And I think if it doesn't, that's where your main issues are. And as a little side note, again, another one of our projects is that when people come on with the intern program with us, we work with them directly for at least a week. So they know exactly what we expect of them. And we know they know exactly what they're doing. Again, like we said before, not throwing them in there and expecting, oh, you're going to know everything about this business. Heck, I've been doing this 20 years and I don't know everything about this business. How the heck's anyone else meant to come in and say, oh, I know how to build a WordPress website using Beaver Builder and Power Packs and all these other things? What? So, we just need to think a little bit more, I think. And, I think the interesting thing is, and I'll close with this for me, that it seems to be the ones who have longevity in their business are the ones who have a really good attitude. They care about their workers, they care about their clients, they care full stop, and they have, awareness of what's going on. The ones that go out of business so quickly are the ones that really don't care about their clients, the ones that are just trying to get their hands in their client's wallet or purse, and they go out of business very, very quickly because they really don't care.
Yeah,
And I think that's what it comes down to for me.
absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap up for today?
I think that's it for me. I mean, I could talk about this topic for a very long time, so
There's so
I'll
much
cut
to,
myself off there.
well, there's so much to unpack about it for sure. And obviously I'm sure we've got so many more stories, and I think it's a topic we will revisit at some point in the future for sure. And if
Yeah.
you guys have got any questions to ask us about this, if you need any help, or you're looking for coaching or guidance, do get in touch with us, because we don't want you to feel, people suffer from, every single day, but you shouldn't have to suffer alone. And that's the main part of doing these shows, not only to educate and to help, but also to provide different strategies and ways to cope. So do obviously comment. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do all that good stuff. Tell a friend, because it could be the very thing that they need in their hour of struggle. Until next time, she has been the awesome Alicia Madonna. I have been your host, John Morris. This has been Bridging the Gap, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye, everybody.